Hello, everybody. And if you're joining us from LinkedIn or Twitter or any of the other platforms, hello to you. This is a conversation that we're going to have today around the power of networking and recruitment. And I'm being joined in the studio by three wonderful people who are going to introduce themselves now. Diane, say hello, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Diane. I'm the owner of DCT Recruitment, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you very much. And Maria, coming almost live from a kitchen showroom near you.
Yes, Maria from James Kitchen, based in West Kirby. This is actually my kitchen showroom, but I can't go live from there because we're having a new display fitted and it's a lot of noise. So, but
it'd be like in the background. Fantastic. And Martin, thanks for joining us. Do introduce yourself, please.
Good morning, everybody. It's Martin Bennett from Ward Williams. We're quantity surveyors, project managers, building surveyors, and the office which I'm speaking from today is in Manchester.
Fantastic. Now, listen, I go live on LinkedIn and different platforms lots, and normally it's a conversation and it's a great chance to open up debate on different subjects, etc. But this is slightly different today because we're, in a way, telling a story as well. Where does this story begin? Perhaps Diane, perhaps you can introduce us to the story, and then we bring people in to talk about it.
Yeah, so the story began from myself having a one-to-one with Maria. So I joined a networking group called Move. Is that me?
The noise in the background. That's the.
I'm so sorry. I told you there's building works going on. It'll finish.
Right, okay. It's all right.
It's a construction conversation, so.
Yeah. Ask them, do they need any joiners or builders? We'll help them.
Yeah.
Right, so me and Maria had a one-to-one from joining a networking group called Move, which was fantastic. We went over to James Kitchens. After that, one of Maria's clients came in, and they got talking about children, just like what the kids are up to, and her client said that if someone wanted to get into project management, so did she know anybody who did apprenticeships in project management? So Maria just off the cuff emailed me, asked, did I know anyone? I said, well, I don't, but I'm in two construction WhatsApp groups, one in Merseyside and one in Manchester. So I just put it out there in the WhatsApp group, and Martin kindly responded. So Martin responded and said he would be, and would we pass over Max's CV?
Okay, so we're talking about a young lad called Max. Let's just talk a little bit about Max so that people listening know who Max is. So, how old is Max? What was Max sort of doing at the time before, wanting to do this? What got him? Do we know what got him interested in that area in the first place? Who would like to go?
I suppose I might fill in here because Martin might not actually know, and I'm not sure if it came up in the process that he was actively involved in. So Gillian, who was one of my suppliers, it was their son that she was talking about, and she was a bit exasperated in the fact that they'd reached out a lot to within her community and connections and couldn't find anyone that was willing to give him a chance. So he was just about to, where he was doing his mocks for his A-levels, and I was absolutely passionate, and he was very sort of focused on the area that he wanted to go into. They were just hitting, dead ends really all around, and I think she was just a bit exasperated with that. And so I just said, well, look, I've got a lot of people in my network, I'll just reach out. So as far as Max is concerned, he didn't even know his mum was doing that on his behalf. So he was none the wiser, and the careers people, I think, at his sixth form were really trying to lead him down a different route, because they too did not know of any, obviously, network connections that would particularly help him. So, but he was adamant he wanted to be on this route. So I, without actually physically asking him, that's what, I heard from Gillian herself. And that's obviously the bit that I got. And I thought, well, surely with all our connections that we have, that we should be able to at least point him in the right direction. And so I actually didn't really have a huge thought process as to whether we'd be successful doing that. I'd reached out to a couple of people, and it was Diane that came back, my other network that I spoke to, who are in the construction industry. It was on a different level, and it was really just through Diane's doggedness, really, that I provided that route, you know, to get us to where we needed to be. So I was just thrilled, to be honest. So that was really all my input. Really, I just reached out.
But those bits of input are really, really important. And let's broaden that conversation for a minute, because is this not a general problem? Martin, I mean, you're obviously looking for people that have got that kind of passion, that actually really, really want to do the kind of work that you know you're trying to get them into. And you know, when we hear all of the time careers, and I had it at school as well, careers teachers told me I couldn't do what I wanted to do, and I ought to look elsewhere because that's not a job you should be looking at. That's you know, there's something wrong there in the system. And yeah, thank goodness for parents actually being determined on behalf of their children and actually trying to help and reach out. And thank goodness that all three of you connected in that way, and that you had relationships, or you formed relationships. You were in a networking group, you were in a construction group, you were able to communicate that need, Diane, because otherwise this would not have happened. So taking it back to kind of the whole school thing, are we going slightly wrong there in terms of where career advice starts in school?
If I just come in there, Graham, I took my son to a sixth form open day. He's 26 now, but when he was 16, we went to an open evening at the school where he was at for the sixth form. And one of the major talking points that evening was how the school was brilliant at filling in UCAS forms to get you into university. And I think out of a 20-minute speech, 10 to 12 minutes was about university. It wasn't actually about any courses. It wasn't about specialisms. It wasn't about how the school was, you know, from a well-being aspect or, sporting or extracurricular activities. It was about, we will help your son or daughter get into university, i.e. we found a way to write up some of the wording which will get you noticed more. And I actually went up to the head of sixth form and said, at what point did you determine that 100% of the audience were here to listen about university? Now, that was 10 years ago. You know, apprenticeship schemes have come in now. You know, there's a sort of change in, I suppose, the way we work as well. But what's quite interesting is I think kids know how much they can earn, and they can now sit at home. So I think, you know, the trades and some of the traditional professions like surveying, project management, you know, architecture, they are under some pressure here because, you do go out early in the morning, you do go onto building sites, you do have to, you know, maybe as a subcontractor pick up materials, you know, first thing in the morning. You know, we all see the white vans leaving our villages and towns at 6:30 in the morning. Now, is that a career path that you want to follow if you can sit in your room and design some graphics or, you know, do some sales and marketing? So I appreciate the fact that some people are, you know, are good in those areas, but there is a shortage in construction. You know, there are a shortage of skills in property and certain other industries as well. And I think, you know, what myself, Diane and Maria did was maybe pool our positions and it sort of pulled an answer together. It doesn't need a head of sixth form to do that. And it doesn't, you know, need a careers advisor to do that, because sometimes, you know, government grants push those careers advisors into certain professions. And then about 3 years later, there's too many people with that qualification. Physios, I think there was a shortage of physios 10 or 15 years ago. There's now a lot of redundant physios because there's a glut of people with that qualification. You know, so we can all recognize those cycles. And I suppose sometimes when you're in a different industry that's not the go-to sort of destination for kids, you know, either from a, you know, appeal point of view or a monetary point of view, you've got to sometimes go back to basics. You know, I think plastering and plumbing is an amazing trade. And it doesn't take a lot for a young person to be maybe running a business of 8 or 10 people after a certain amount of time. I think you get enjoyment out of running your own business. You can be in control of your clients, and I think you've got a really good position you can build there from a what could be seen as a very traditional skill that is now being downplayed quite a lot. We've seen a lot of influx from Europe as the cities in the UK expand. And now after COVID and Brexit, I think there is a problem, and I think you've got to adapt and you've got to try and fill those gaps, not just through a careers service and not through universities. We've got to maybe do it a different way, and I think that's what worked on this occasion.
Thank you, Martin. Maria, you've got a business that relies on people getting their hands dirty. I mean, the kitchen looks clean at the end of it, but it doesn't get there without people, sweating and toiling, does it? So, have you had similar problems in terms of finding the talent coming through?
I think Diane will know, from our group that we have every week, that the one constant thing I'm always asking for are joiners, builders, trades, architects, interior designers. They are what help fuel my business in various different ways. And I have a shortage now. I have a really good group of those trades. However, it's not enough because the demand right now is huge and probably will remain that way in the construction industry for some time. I mean, to be fair, the dwindling trade market, has been severely hit for a number of years. I think what COVID did was really highlight the fact that we had a shortage, but then we had a glut. That will fall back a little bit, that glut of home improvements. But what won't change is the fact that we don't have enough tradespeople coming through to learn those trades to keep it going. And sooner or later, we're going to end up with a real problem if we haven't already hit that right now. And also, these trades, they can name their price right now because there's so much work out there. They can pick and choose. They are really cherry picking right now. So for me, forming and building those relationships is absolutely key. However, if they don't want to fit you in, unless you've got the right, cost point, price point, you're dead in the water, from that sort of point of view. I mean, right now, that kitchen that's being installed in my showroom right now, it's actually from the manufacturer themselves because they offer a service to fit it. I would not have had a fitting team available to do it. So thank goodness they were available because all mine are booked. But that doesn't stop the fact that I've still got lots of clients coming through that I cannot right now fulfill every one of those needs in the right way. So going back to what Martin said, right in the first place, about schools and implementing maybe a different strategy. You're right, Martin, it's not just down to the school to do that, but unfortunately what they are telling the children and the young adults is it isn't strictly going to be right for all of them. It's not one fits all, as you rightly said. And it's been a real pain point for me, and I think me and Diane have had this conversation. I know Diane goes into schools and speaks about, the benefits of her industry and, talks about the real attributes that they can actually bring to society in that way. But you're also right. A lot of our young people have come from a gaming sort of position where being at home and being ensconced and on their phones and scrolling constantly. Why not do that? If you don't have to. But again, like Martin said, we are going to actually hit a level where that is so saturated that they're going to have to look elsewhere, and that's going to take time to then fill the other gaps again. The answer is that we need better education for the young ones to make informed decisions. And if there aren't enough of the schools getting on board to say, right, let's have a diverse amount of people that can come in and deliver some sound advice and information, the children are just going to keep on going towards colleges and universities that are very, they can only do so many courses. As varied as they might seem, that they're only going to be, the ones that are popular. We know in my industry, they've stopped doing actually kitchen design courses, as in university degrees, which is such a shame. There was only one university doing it. They stopped it. And that's such a shame. So from my industry point of view, that means we're not going to get qualified designers coming through the system, which is what we desperately do need.
Unless the industry does it itself,
Well, that was with the industry really pushing it. We have something called the KBB, which is Kitchens, Bedrooms, Bathrooms industry, and they really worked very hard with this particular university to get that on board. I know there's still talks around that to get more on board, but without, unfortunately, individual studios like me, we don't have the gravitas for that. So we rely on the industry bodies like the KBB to actually do a lot of that work for us, to push it. They knew there was a need. They heard the independent kitchen studios and heard what we were saying, and they took it on themselves to try and bolster that and see where they could get to it. But unfortunately, the funding then stopped for it. They didn't see it as a worthy trade, or course or degree to continue with. I know there's still fighting talk out there, but again, this is what we're up against sometimes.
Well, it would be interesting to see how that impacts on the education establishments as well long term, and whether actually someone comes in to be quite disruptive in that. Well, I think we're seeing a little bit of that in sort of North America and Canada at the moment, where some of the community colleges, etc., are sort of forming partnerships with tech companies, the larger tech companies like Amazon, etc., and they're starting to broadcast courses and get in the talent to cover courses that other universities aren't doing, etc., because they need to offer courses that aren't just academic, because that's where the majority of their people are that are coming in. They're not necessarily academic students. They are students that want to learn but don't necessarily have that kind of bent towards education. Diane, how can we make the change? How can we find more Maxes for a start and actually encourage these young people to come through the right system to get them into work?
I think, like Maria said, going out, speaking to schools, letting children, young adults understand about what recruitment is, what an agency is. They could come into that. I've had another CV today from a guy who's just finished his engineering degree. It's very broad engineering, but he's looking to get into something like that, and he's struggling himself to maybe find them graduate positions and stuff. So again, I've put it in all of my socials, so hopefully we'll see maybe something come back. Somebody's replied saying, I've spoken to such and such a company, they'll send me the details. So hopefully maybe there might be another success story. But I just think it's educating people around what is out there. My idea is sitting here listening to you guys, spinning, thinking, I would love to have a second part of the recruitment company where we did our own training. So if we could become a training provider where we could do all these trades and recruitment, then I'm solving my own problems as well as solving the problems for your clients. So that's where, you start thinking about, going back to our conversation when we had it with Marion about training and construction, could we try and maybe take it on board as a company and say, could we try and find a solution, in some way, moving along the lines. That's where I'm starting to think, because to Maria's point to Martin's, it's just going to get even more saturated, and you're just going to have no one in 10 years' time, because everybody's going to, AI is a big thing now, isn't it? And all the children are into computers and this, and so we'll either end up having robots doing bricklaying, or like the way forwards in life. But will it work?
Yeah, in the middle of the pandemic, when we were in the middle of lockdown, I did a piece of content with a guy called Lee Rawlinson, who's actually involved with student housing, etc., and they try and support students kind of beyond the institution, as it were. And one of the things that he was really keen to try and work on was trying to get more students at a young age onto things like LinkedIn, because part of the reason this may have happened is because you were connected on socials, etc., and therefore you had connectivity between each other. Our young people are, yes, on Instagram and yes, on all of these things, but that's not necessarily helping them to find a path into work. It's not really showing them who the main players are in business and connecting them with them and starting those conversations. Should we kind of bring training in on these kind of things into schools as well, and actually start to go, look, you do need to once you start looking at getting into the workplace, you need to be on these platforms. You need to be on them early. You need to be building your CV, and you need to be starting those conversations with people.
Sorry, Martin. Go on.
Yeah, I was going to say you're right, Graham. But let me throw one in, because this is Diane's. This could be Diane's next venture now. What do we all need more from sort of a couple of years ago, looking forward? Electricians. Every boiler in this country will be going from gas to electric in the next 10, 15 years. We're all going to be driving electric cars. They all need chargers. They all need charging stations. They'll all need fixing. All those combi boiler lads and lasses who've got gas registered qualifications, that's all on the way out. It's all going to be replaced by people with electrical qualifications. I bet, Diane, if you went round the schools and see how many electrical organisations, contractors, training colleges, how many of those are currently being invited into our schools and colleges? I bet you there's a very, very small percentage. Yeah. So on top of us being short of plasterers and bricklayers and glazers and kitchen installers, we've already got a shortage of electricians as we stand today. The government has got a massive push for 600,000 heat pumps per year to be fitted into existing properties. We're failing miserably. One of it is because we don't actually have the heat pumps in the first place to install, but we don't have anyone to install them either. So we're never going to hit those targets on carbon by 2050 or whatever the date is. And we don't seem to. I don't see any headlines advertising for electrical training or electricians to be converted from gas fitters. But that's the headline. That's now come to the surface in news organisations, journalists' pieces. So it's already a problem for them to have picked it up. So where did they pick it up from? Some investigations or some writers who've pulled that together. Has that hit the schools yet? Do the kids realise again that there's an amazing opportunity there, for long-term employment, and it's not just a little blip or a little bit of creativity that they might do for 5 or 6 years? This could be a long-term occupation. I don't see it. I don't see any headlines, and that's happening already.
You're absolutely right. There is no headlines, and it's funny you should say that, because one of the things that I've spoken to quite a few apprenticeship providers about is, are you offering any more like practical side, of these courses? There are very few that actually offer to do any trades, where they can do an apprenticeship. They're called that they will do an apprenticeship, but they will do it through an electrical company, or they'll do it as an apprentice while they're working with an electrician. So they can do that. But actually, for some of those young adults wanting to go on their next career path, and they don't know of somebody that's going to take them on, because as you said, there's a shortage. What should really be available is more apprenticeships that are available in an apprenticeship providing environment, that maybe not all of them are going to be actually on the job apprenticeships, so they can actually do a lot of the because there is a lot of academia around an electrician's apprenticeship. I know this because my daughter's boyfriend, he is soon to be qualified to a certain level, which means he can now do electrical work. And my goodness, are we not keeping him busy? By doing those works. He can't sign off full electrical installation, but he's already done 3 years. And he's sort of like been on apprenticeship wage for 3 years. That's the other issue here, is that with apprenticeships, there are some employers out there that will pay more than the minimum apprenticeship wage. But a lot of businesses, and this is what we've also got to change, a lot of businesses have got the wrong idea about apprentices. You know, they think they can take them on for maybe 2, maybe 3 years at a low wage and then cast them away without, you know, because they don't want the cost. You know, we've got to re-educate ourselves as employers as well, you know, on this side of that this is actually something that can be nurtured and actually is going to be amazing asset to your business and is in the long run going to bring your business in. You know, and not to be too short-sighted on that side of it. So there's many facets, I think, to whether it be colleges as well that can offer more trades qualifications, because as you said, Martin, there are not enough electricians to perhaps be able to offer on-the-job apprenticeships. You know, so there has to be a filling gap here, you know, for them. Diane, you spoke really well about, you know, I will be the training provider. Yeah. And that's fantastic, but we need more buy-in, you know, from society, from businesses. LinkedIn is a fantastic platform, but so many people, including in my own remit, people go, oh yeah, but that's just for headhunting. It's not just for headhunting, it's a social platform. It's where all the engagement happens. And this is where, you know, as we stand as testament today, you know, where we've been able to create an opportunity between us for a young man to fulfill his dreams. All we're basically saying is, if you've got a dream, don't bother having one, because in actual fact, we're just going to quash it at every stage, because we don't have the remit, we don't have the facilities, we do not have the resources to be able to help you. That's what we're basically saying to our young people, which is such a shame, you know, when we've got so many businesses out there that could do so much more, but perhaps they are just ill-informed. Maybe they're not being given the right input either to be able to make these decisions. To, you know, at the end of the day, the reason we all network is to be able to, you know, inform ourselves better than where we are now through speaking to our peers, you know, in a lot of situations. So if we don't educate ourselves to be able to say, right, we can make a difference, you're quite right. Where's the noise, Graham, you know, to make the difference? But it needs a lot of people to get on board with it, you know, to do that. And individually, whilst we might be making little inroads, unfortunately, we do stand alone in that.
I can see Diane trying to cut in there. Yeah, Diane.
I think going on that, I went to an event with a big, massive construction provider, and they were talking about this, saying how like it's a shortage and stuff. So at the end of it, I spoke to one of the people there, and I said, well, why don't you do it yourself? So, you know, it was, you know, Liverpool's training ground in West Derby, that's getting changed into the academy. I said, you've got the facility here to set up your own training. You know, I would come as volunteer and do part of what I could do of anything. You know, I've been a trainer myself. You know, I could do the health and safety side, whatever, anything, you know, not necessarily the trades. And then, you know, you get people within their organisation, the trades, who could just do one day here and there. You know, if they started people off on, you know, just a general CSCS course, labouring, and then move them into the trades that once they've been onto the site and seen the different trades and had a feel of it, what they wanted to go to, then I think the really big construction companies need to work together with the government to come together with that answer, because there's no point everyone sitting there moaning about it, which they have done for probably the best part of 20, 30 years. That they've got to collaborate together and come together to be able to be their own solution, you know. And in some ways, like for me as an agency, I'm going to put myself onto business saying this, but then they wouldn't need to have people like that, would they? You know, because they're going to homegrown their own people that come through the ranks, you know. And not only that, you're going to have them at your level and expectation, you know. Martin and I have been speaking about like looking for someone else, and it's not just the skill set, is it? It's the interpersonal skills that people bring. It's the how does your what's your culture like in your team, what's your culture like in your office. So they're not just going to homegrown the skill, they're going to homegrown the quality of people that they want by teaching them different like leadership qualities, you know, how to be teamwork, you know, all that type of stuff, because they're all going to grow up together as a team and going to want to help each other out and move forward. I think that needs to become something that people collaboratively work together with, personally.
Yeah,
I think there are some good apprenticeship schemes run by, you know, certain businesses. I'll give you an example. Seddon Homes, just on the edge of Bolton, have got a really good apprenticeship for young people. But I think they offer, maybe 4 or 5 a year, maybe 10. They get 1,000 applications.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, where it ends up is they're picking the ones with the best academic results to get into the interview. Whereas, how do you become the best bricklayer or the best plumber or the best electrician if your English and your science and your geography levels are being looked at? They've got to come up with a way of differentiating before they can actually interview. So, they've got to lose 950 out of the 1,000 people before they even get to that point. But I suppose it's the small builders, it's the small electrical companies where, maybe in the old days, I had friends who went on to plastering courses or tiling courses at 16. They went down to Bolton College and that's what they did. They did 1 day a week, or you did night school. You did whatever you suddenly realised you wanted to be once you'd got a job at night school. And I think, times have changed, education, the courses, I think they've got to stay in school for longer now before you actually make some decisions. But I think the vocational elements, rather than the work experience being in a bank or being where your mum and dad work or something, there needs to be a little bit more flexibility there. Maybe the council have their own trade departments. The council still do quite a lot of work on their own properties or, throughout the towns and the cities where we live. So maybe there needs to be more joined up thinking between colleges and councils and local government, where you can maybe have some work experience in different occupations, and it'll just broaden that opportunity rather than someone going through a degree that actually doesn't get them anything. And then they've got the debts of 4 or 5 years and, they've had a good time. They've met people at university. Like you say, Diane, they might have picked up some of the softer skills that might help them in the long term. But then they're retraining. The number of people who've got MSCs in a job that they now want, and it's got no connection whatsoever to their first degree, means they're 4 or 5 years behind, possibly, at that point. Yeah. Which, that's okay. But they've got a debt, and they've got, they've already probably got some skills that they may never use ever again. So, let's grab them when they're younger. Let's try and sieve them through and get them a bit more involved at an earlier stage so they don't need to refocus down the line.
Yeah. How much can the trade help itself? How much can the sector help itself? I say that because I thought it was really interesting what you said earlier, Martin, about the fact that, there's obviously the sexy trades these days of sitting and doing stuff at home, marketing, social media, graphics, etc., which you don't have to move. And then there's all of this other stuff. But how do young people get the desire in the first place to want to do some of the other stuff unless they actually see it? We took our children, and we live in a rural area, we took our young children to an open farm day recently where, it's a commercial farm. They're producing milk. They got to see everything, to be honest. One of my kids nearly fainted because they saw a cow being born. They saw milking happening. They saw all of the sustainability side of it, how they manage energy, etc. on the farm. But things like that can build desire, and awaken children to going, I never knew this existed as a job. This is a job. How can the trade actually help build that desire in the first place?
To be fair, I have seen on LinkedIn quite a few industries having children to the sites for the day. I have seen quite a bit, so hopefully maybe people are starting to get on board and do that, because I think that's where it's important. It's not engaging a high school, it's probably engaging a primary school, getting people to come in, from the beginning to see what it looks like, how it works. I think then if a child goes and gets an experience like that they just blew them out the water and it's just so memorable, they will definitely be like, oh, I want to be a bricklayer or I want to be an electrician now. They will just continually remember it and then work towards that. So I have seen a fair few companies, to be fair, doing things like that, taking the kids. So I do think maybe some of that's starting to happen.
I think there are more school visits. There's a number of people in construction throughout the Northwest where they've got initiatives to get into the schools and the colleges. I think traditionally, Graham, it would come from maybe your father or your mother. I think if somebody's, if you've got a family who have always built houses, normally the kids start to follow the parents a little bit. So I think, there's uncles or aunts who are into certain trades or occupations, maybe gets explored a little bit. And,
I think that's true. I think that's true that, we've see it here locally, you'll get and son or and daughter, will go into an electrician's trade or whatever. But that, I don't think we can rely on that anymore because I think there's such a diversity of jobs that they potentially could do, that we need to be, I think the trades themselves need to be kind of mindful that they perhaps need to make it a little bit more sexy as well. I mean, even there's a guy on Instagram who's made millions out of doing hooves for horses. I don't know whether you've ever seen that, but he goes around, he puts them in a crush, he cleans their hooves, he gets rid of the infection. Millions. He's got house full of or a garage full of motor cars and whatever, and he's very proud of all of the millions that he's made from all of it. He's aspirational to anyone potentially thinking about going into that. Perhaps we even need to encourage or give the skills to people within the trade to go, this is how you present this on things like social media. So do you encourage the next generation to go, yeah, I could go and do that. I could be the best electrician in the world. Look what I could achieve. Because that's really where it comes from. We all, when we're young, we build those desires from what we see around us, don't we?
You know what? It's a really good concept, actually. Well, not concept; it's an actual thing, isn't it? Whereby people going into schools, is not a new thing. Your parent goes into school and tells you about what they do to the class. It's an old thing, but I think it does need a bit of a revamp. What probably primary school and even teenagers, if you were to do anything very similar, you're right, that sexiness to it needs to be that desire, the attractiveness of it. So it needs to be the younger ones that probably go in and where they're more relatable, to that age group. But going in and saying, have you ever wondered how a house is built? Do you know how your light actually switches on? And what do you do if it doesn't? It's not just a case of changing the bulb. What do you do? What's your first thing? That might be a really good question to start with. Do the children in your class know how, a light works apart from switching it on? And would they know what to do if it didn't? I mean, obviously primary school, that's a little bit too deep, but essentially it's a case of, wouldn't it be really great to be able to at least do some basics yourself? But if you wanted to explore it even more, it's a bit like people tinkering with their cars. They do that because they have a desire, because they want to try and do it themselves. What we've gone into is a society of that, there's always somebody else there to do it, or perhaps there's going to be Google and they'll be able to help us do it. But in actual fact, with something like electrics, everyone goes, oh God, I might electrocute myself, can't do that, but not realizing, as we've all said, that actually you still need those people to come through. My dad actually said it to me. My dad retired. My dad's nearly 80 and he retired last year, and he's a painter and decorator. And I said to him, he worked with an interior designer and with an estate agent who had lots of estate agents, and he would just do all their redecoration. And I said, so have you told them you're retiring, Dad? And he said, Jerry goes, they're in a bit of a pickle now, though. I said, why? He goes, because they haven't got anybody else they can rely on to do it. And I said, surely they must know a painter and decorator. Clearly not. He goes, because I've been doing it. And my dad set about trying to find somebody. He goes, I found someone. He goes, they're just not as good as me, and I don't know if I can fully recommend that person to them. There is the whole point. My dad, is old school. And just assumed that people would keep coming through. My brother did a YTS bricklaying course. My dad did a YTS paint and decorator course. But there aren't always those things around now, are there?
No. I also wonder whether we talk about going into schools, and I'm passionate about trying to get into schools about lots of different things, because I think that's really where it starts. But it actually isn't that easy.
No.
and maybe part of the problem is there's a lack of funding anyway within the education system to enable this to happen in the first place, and whether there's a way of actually, again, people like ourselves or industry actually getting involved in it. Yeah.
So I've gone into school because I just seen one of my friends I went to school with. She's a head teacher, and she just put, could anyone come in? We're having a careers day. Could anyone come in and speak? And I just messaged saying, yeah, I don't mind to come in and speak, because I could speak about a few different careers, from different angles. I think, some of it's about taking your own accountability. Like, how much does this mean to you? That do you want to? I'm sure if you reached out to people and said, look, I'd like to do this. What's your thoughts? What's your opinions? Would you need any help with that?
I reached out to a local college and said, I'd love to come in and talk about this. And they said, yes, we'd love you to come in and talk about this. And they said, this is the person that's responsible for this. But that person's never contacted me about it, even though we've chased them up time and time again. And
really?
what I got back was, the trouble is that they are under-resourced. And because they're under-resourced, they're struggling to actually make the time happen. So it's just, that's why I'm asking the question, is that part of the reason this doesn't happen enough? People may be volunteering, but it doesn't necessarily bring it to fruition.
So again, for me, the local authority should already have that in place. It shouldn't be a 16 or an 18 age point where we're making those decisions. Surely the head of education in a particular area should be saying, right, I've got 25 primary schools and 15 high schools. At what point am I going to introduce local employers, local businesses, local trades? Is it an open day where everyone's at? Or do we do, let's do an accountant, this term, let's do, a lawyer, let's do something from construction, let's do something from retail, let's do something from finance. Let's do it during the year with a local employer who actually does take on apprentices or young people, or who takes people from Liverpool John Moores or University of Manchester or Salford at certain points. Surely that's what their remit is to bring people through at certain ages. So that's got to start earlier. That's all we're saying here, isn't it? Bring in some inspiration at certain points. So when they come to making their decisions on lesson choices at 14 or whatever the stages are, they've already had a little bit of a sort of thought about what comes later. I had no idea at 14 what I wanted to be. I had no idea when I was 18 what I wanted to be. I still had no idea probably when I got my degree that I wanted to be
Have you got an idea now, Martin?
It's sort of coming together at the moment, Diane. I'm like surveying. I've done it for about 30 years now, and maybe I'll give it a shot. But you don't know. So you sometimes get told just to pick the things that you're best at or the things that you enjoy the most. But if you've then had a bit of an open day where you've seen what an electrician does, or you see what a physiotherapist does, you think, all right, well, I do like biology and English, but I'll keep my PE or my other bit because it means I can go into that occupation later down the line. If you're into chemical engineering and you want to end up at Sellafield, you've got to get a chemistry A level, which is one of the hardest because you've got to remember 10,000 formulas or something. If you know you're never going to do chemistry to that level, you're going to have to cross that out at some point. So it's maybe better to cross it out at 14 rather than 18 when you've gone all the way through and failed it. So I think there's just that little bit of grease on the wheel here that's just missing. Everyone individually knows what they want to get to, but it doesn't feel like it's like it's down to Diane ringing up a school to say, can I come in and do something? I think the boot's on the wrong foot there, isn't it? The education system should be saying to Diane, here's a slot, can you do it? We'd like you to talk about X, Y, and Z. So it feels like it's slightly back to front at the moment.
I agree. The challenge is out there, education.
There's probably people watching it. Oh, we do this, we do that. I think going back to your point earlier, though, I think there should be some form of careers fair before you have to pick your options, in year 9 when you've got to pick what GCSEs you're doing, because that's the foundation, isn't it, of what you're doing? Because you're totally right there, Martin. Like, you might think, I'll drop PE because Spanish is more important because I might go traveling or I might this. And or they enjoy Spanish, but then that Spanish wouldn't get them into physiotherapy if that's what they want to do later on in life. I think, it is hard as well for children to decide what they want to do at that age, which is why I think everyone goes with the broad spectrum subjects, don't they? And then, they've got to go back again and do what they wanted to do the next time round, and they realise that this is what I'm going to do now.
Yeah. And we won't even go into the conversation about the fact that broad spectrum is still very academic. And, until that widens out into perhaps more practical.
To be fair on that, Graham, our Thomas's school, he went to Liverpool College in by Sefton Park. And the reason I chose the school for him was it wasn't all about academics. And what you can do there, like they've got the army, they've got the navy, they've got the cadets. So from year 9, you choose one of them. Like he learned to fly a glider. They flew a glider themselves. They flew a plane themselves. He missed out a bit because of the COVID, because of that. But they have all of that. Plus they have a big rugby, football, netball, and then they do a lot for art and music. So that school I chose for that reason, because you'd have to do an exam, but you didn't get in there because of your exam results, because the next artist might not be able to do maths and English, might be.
No. Oh, lost Diane there for a minute.
We dropped out. Just to have people to a moment.
It would be interesting to know, actually, how many of our electricians that are out there at the moment actually did get trained by the army. That would be an interesting figure, because I expect it's quite a lot. How many people went into the army, became an electrical engineer or whatever, and then actually have now come back out and are actually doing electrics within the community. Probably.
I think that's a good point, Graham, because I know a lot of people have been in the army, and the actual skill sets they get out of it, whether it's learning to drive, in general, or learning to drive, these amazing sort of trucks and, armoured vehicles, but not just that. They actually give them practical skill sets, actually, which are going to benefit them in life. I mean, there's something to be said for that. We need to be building skill sets for our young adults in many different facets. We need to, they need to understand how bank accounts work, how loans work, how mortgages work. These are all really important as well. But actually being able to be a bit more self-sufficient, within themselves, and not expect that mummy and daddy are going to bail them out every single time, whether it's financially or whether it's by doing the washing and their ironing all the time. It's not just those. It's not just that. It's a case of, if my car needs filling with oil, do I know how to do it? It's silly things like that. We take, even I know how to do that, but changing a wheel. I had this big thing on LinkedIn and I got berated severely over it. I mean, it was one of my biggest posts I put on saying, should we teach our kids, basic skill sets? And one of them was, Jack was there, he was trying to change his wheel, didn't really know how to do it. And somebody sat back and said, well, you're all too willing to take a photograph of him, but, you're not actually helping him. I said, no, I was helping him, but there's no point me doing it for him, and one, I'd never changed a wheel myself either. But the point is it was important for me to know that he could do that, because I never got shown it. So for me, it was like, okay, so what if something happens to me and I'm not around to sort of guide you through it? You need to do it yourself. There's all these things, and whether it's, you'd have to put plugs on anything these days, but it used to be, didn't it? Being able to put a plug on and being able to change a light bulb and being able to do basic things like putting the loo lid back on the loo, stupid things like that, where you get all these days. Most young people just sort of sit there and go, I don't know. So they just allow it to happen. They don't try and fix anything, because it's been built into them that, we're in a society where you don't have to be self-sufficient anymore.
But it's also that come from how much societies move forward with women being in work, so, if you look back at, when I was growing up, my mum was there, she taught us everything. We had to hoover every weekend or polish, we had to set the table, we had to do our chores to get our pocket money, she taught us how to bake cakes, whatever. But if I look now, like from being a working single mum at times, I've had a cleaner. So Thomas is lazy, won't clean his room, or, our society's become so busy, hasn't it, that, both parents are working such intense jobs that we probably teach them that as well at the same time. Oh yeah, well, you can just ring someone out that. You got a flat tire now, you can just ring someone out to the house, can't you? To come and fix it for you while it's getting done. And when someone will come out and clean your car while you're still in the house clean, whatever. There's just amenities at hand for everything, isn't it? That in some ways it's great society's moved forward, but have we created our own laziness?
Well, don't worry, Diane. This stay-at-home working dad does make the children do chores, and I show them how to do it. So,
So all your kids can change a tyre?
Yeah, not on my watch. I'm not having any of that. I'd love to bring this conversation all the way around and back to Max again right at the end as well. Martin, give us an idea that because of all of this happening, because of the communication, what does the future now look like for Max? Where's Max going now?
So Max came in to see us a couple of Fridays ago. I think he was nervous, coming in to see somebody he'd not spoken to before. Maybe Diane had briefed him a little bit, or Maria or his mum, just to sort of say, sounds like a nice company, don't worry, talk about your hobbies, your exams or whatever. But I always do it a little bit differently. Have you got here? What's going on? When was your last exam? Now you've got a holiday after all your A-levels. What's your plans? So we try and just listen to the person. Hear who they are. Just get them to relax a little bit. He was still twitching in his pocket. He was still wondering what the hurdle was going to be that he had to jump over, or waiting for the tricky question. But we told him we'd get an apprenticeship through Liverpool John Moores University. We told him, he would be in a nice office. I brought him up into the room I am now and introduced him to Sam, who's just been promoted to QS level, who went to Liverpool John Moores, who laboured on building sites when he got his degree, just as COVID was starting. And he joined us sort of a year into COVID. So Sam explained what he'd done at Liverpool John Moores and how he'd enjoyed working here. I introduced him to Rebecca, who's one of our PMs, so he could sort of see what a PM is doing and how they got into their occupation and into their sort of current position. And then we offered him a job. And it was as simple as that.
Oh.
Well,
it's such a breath of fresh air of what you've done. I couldn't thank you. Me and Maria, what were we like, Maria? On the day it's like we've got it. And I think the beauty of this, obviously you're going to gain now, Martin, because you're going to get Max. But I think the beauty of it is not one of us was getting anything out of the next chain of command till it got to the last part, which is for yourself. So, I think that shows the power of network, and that it's a giver's gain, isn't it? You don't always need to be getting something out of it. It's just wanting to help people.
Look, I'm always going to be positive in those situations, but he still had to be a good guy. He still had to have some qualifications. I still wanted to have a feel of who he was. He still had to have, it's not hunger at 18, but there's got to be something. Look, if somebody fell into that room, they weren't going to get a job just because you'd introduced him. So it's just, as I say, I think I said grease on the wheel earlier. That's what we're doing. I want to bring somebody through. We want to give them a good education and a good occupation, but there's got to be something on their side as well. When we the old-fashioned phrase is you can take the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So that's what we're doing here. We're facilitating that opportunity. But Max had he had to do a lot to get it, but when he had done it, it was there to be taken. So we can glue it all together, but the student or the young person or the person being interviewed does still need to bring a lot to the table. But he was doing that, but we'll drag him into that position as well. And I think that's all. That's all we did. We all put him in that place basically, and gave him the opportunities to see whether it would work basically.
Well, let's continue to be the glue. Let's continue to bring people opportunities and bring people together. That's the power of networking, everybody. Thanks to everybody for taking part in this conversation today. Maria, Martin, Diane, thank you so much for coming together. if you've been challenged by anything that we said today, if you believe that there's something that you could do differently, or something that you feel like authorities could do differently, and you've got an opinion on this, please do comment as you see this going around during the day. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this conversation. This has been DCT Recruitment, delivering careers together this day and every day. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining in. Bye for now.
Thanks, Graham.
Thank you, guys.